totally detracts from the message.
Yeah, and I think it completely throws off all the Saw movies just because of that. Hi, this is Mash Rundown. We do trailer reactions and movie reviews a couple times a week. So if you're enjoying our content, subscribe and hit the like button down below.
On this Throwback Thursday, we're going to be doing our movie review for Saw, the first one. Saw is a 2004 thriller movie directed by James Wan. It's written by Leigh Whannell and stars Leigh Whannell, Cary, Elwes, Danny Glover, and Tobin Bell.
Saw is more of a psychological thriller than a horror, I would say. And it starts with two men that wake up in a bathroom. They're chained up to these old rusty pipes. And they've been instructed to essentially escape. But in order to escape and save themselves and their families, they have to solve certain puzzles that Jigsaw has set for them. And so the movie just follows their journey. It's a little bit slow-paced because there's a lot of back and forward and talking. So it really felt more like a introduction to the Saw franchise than a movie on its own.
Yeah.
So as far as themes go, I think the main theme in this, or at least how I view it in accordance to what other people have said, is revenge versus lessons taught. So a lot of people say that Jigsaw really teaches people lessons, teaches people how to enjoy life because they've forgotten. But especially this first movie for me, I think it's more about revenge because the Doctor and Zeph are people known to Jigsaw.
Yeah.
And even though the Doctor's done some questionable things, he hasn't actually cheated on his wife. He has quite a good relationship with his daughter. So I'm not quite sure why Jigsaw thinks that he deserves to be punished and he's not appreciating life. It was just bizarre. And even in the hospital scene right in the beginning where the doctor's talking about the patients, I think he's being fair. He's teaching young doctors how to do a client history, how to do a case presentation, which are all important things that they need to learn. And unfortunately, in that field of work, you cannot get attached to every single patient. People would just burn out and not be able to continue in their profession. So I don't think he was being a bad doctor. I know in the patient's seat, and I've been there, I've been that patient where the doctor and the student doctors are talking about you. I know it kind of sucks, but I also understand and I want our future to have good doctors that are able to compartmentalize. So I understand that they're doing that for a reason, and I'm not begrudged against them because of it. I don't think back on that memory and think, oh, well, they were such asses because they didn't use my name. I'm like, it was a bit awkward, but I understand.
And like you say, when it becomes a revenge thing, it kind of detracts from the message of you need to live your life to the fullest, you need to appreciate life, because now it's just a revenge thing.
Yeah, and I think it completely throws off all the Saw movies just because of that.
Yeah.
I also think it points out very aptly that Jigsaw's obviously not well.
Yes.
And he thinks he's on this crusade to help people, but in fact his motivations lie very outside of what he thinks they are. And he's mentally unstable, so, it makes sense.
And another major theme in the movie is sacrifice. How much are you willing to sacrifice to survive? How much are you willing to sacrifice to save your family in that? And the movie goes through that. It forces these characters to look at their survival instinct. How far will they go? And it's done very well in that regard.
It is. And I think people don't realize how far they'll go in order to survive. Much further than you think when you're not in these type of situations. That takes us to the good. I thought the filming was really creative, especially if you consider the fact that they had a very low budget. So a lot of the more horror-ish scenes were done off screen, so you didn't exactly see, for example, the guy's head being chopped off or blown up or whatever it was. And I think this actually gave more credence to the movie and made it more entertaining because it avoided all that gore that maybe some people don't like. Yep. And they didn't have to worry about having crappy special effects because they just didn't show it.
And with that being done so well, it's sad that the main thing that the sequels took away from this was let's torture people and show the most gruesome deaths we possibly can.
Yeah, it is sad because I thought that was probably the movie's greatest strength.
So it went from being a psychological, you're imagining these things happening, to, oh, I just don't want to watch anymore.
Yeah. No, true. I also thought the filming was interesting. For example, when they're filming the doctor, it's very stable. It's like they used a steady cam. And that really tells us a lot about his personality, because he is a trained physician, so he would have to have nerves of steel, basically, because he's used to being under pressure. Whereas when they go to Adam, it's much more of a shaky cam, almost like they had a handheld that was moving around a lot. And that showed how anxious he was, how he was definitely not used to being in the spotlight and being in trouble, because he was used to being the one watching and being behind the camera.
And he definitely did seem a little more unstable.
Yeah, so I thought they did that so well.
The concept itself is also very original. It's a good concept. And it was pretty well executed, like you said, with the forming and everything. And Jigsaw came across as incredibly ominous and creepy. And it's weird because it's a silly little doll, in essence. But just with his voice, it works so well to bring this dread to every situation. Like if I said, oh, do you want to play a game? It's not scary. Even if I try and make it scary, it won't be scary. But Jigsaw saying, that's scary.
And I think it taps into those horror movies that were very popular when we were kids, about possessed dolls and Chucky and all of those things. And it gave the movie a little bit of that mystical feel because of that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it was particularly effective for us because we grew up with those kind of horrors.
But it definitely was. So let's move on to the bad. The thing I don't like about this movie is something we've already spoken about. It reinvigorated that torture porn industry where you just want to watch people get tortured. And I don't like that. It's not fun to watch, especially a movie that was a psychological thriller in essence, to deviate into bad slashers, bad, gruesome nonsense, essentially.
Yeah.
It's sad that that's the message that was taken from this.
What I didn't like quite a bit was the unrealistic atmosphere that the movie had. In some parts of the movie, they were in that abandoned building and there was mist on the floor. It's like, how did mist get into the abandoned building? It's just not normal.
Yeah.
And I know it was to give us more of a creepy atmosphere, but then they could have rather done it outside or in a different setting.
Or used other props, other scenery to do that. You didn't need mist on the floor.
Yeah.
It jars you, it pulls you out.
I also thought that the twist was quite unrealistic. Spoilers. Who can lay on the floor for 6 hours, so still, that no one notices you breathing?
Not even a trained physician notices that you're breathing.
Yeah. That's bizarre, and it's just so unrealistic. And like you say, because one of the captives was a trained physician, it just feels so much more unlikely.
And in general, Jigsaw's plan, he's either psychic or the luckiest killer in the world. Because so many things had to fall perfectly in line for it to work out like it did.
Yeah.
How? You can't predict that kind of stuff. It was largely down to chance. So if you stand back for a second and look at the plan, it doesn't actually make sense.
Yeah. I think what I've noticed about people is people are really unpredictable.
Yes.
I don't think everything would have worked out exactly the way he wanted. But then again, I also feel like maybe he had the video camera there, so he could have put on another tape and given them more hints or something, I suppose.
It's hard to adjust your plan when you're lying on the floor.
But he had remotes and stuff in his hand, which he apparently could use without anyone seeing.
Yes. I can imagine one hand you've got the button to electrocute the one guy, one hand you've got the button to electrocute the other guy. But that leaves you very little movement to...
But you have a remote with different buttons. And now that you remind me about that, that electrocuting thing didn't make sense either, because where was the power coming from? Where was it grounded? Yeah, okay. I also thought that the movie had very limited character development, especially for Danny Glover's character, the cop.
I was so sad to see him in that movie.
Why on earth was he so hell-bent on catching Jigsaw? And, like, who cares about the warrant? And it's like, well, if you find anything in there without these extenuating circumstances, nothing's admissible, so what's the point? It's just, no, his motives are all off and just didn't make sense to me. Even with his partner dying,
Yeah.
he was obsessed way before his partner died. So it was just not well explained.
No.
And when he was like, the doctor did this because we found that flashlight pen or whatever, and it's like, he works in a hospital. He probably touches so many pens and flashlights and whatnot and puts them down or anything, but anyone can.
Yeah. For me, the movie was very slow in reality because of the exposition. It was, let's start the movie, let's have exposition. Let's have a flashback to give us more exposition. In the flashback, let's do another flashback for further exposition. So we're just getting exposition constantly, and so tedious sometimes to watch the movie, just to have things explained to you constantly.
I like that, but I do agree it did slow down the pace a bit too much. So they could have worked on that a little bit more.
Yeah.
I also didn't like this thing where they're going, he's not really a killer because he hasn't killed anyone himself. And like, in what way? He set up people, kidnapped them, put them in dangerous positions, put cages on their heads so if you don't get the key in time, your head explodes. And you're supposed to say, no, he's not a killer. And like, really?
He's a killer.
You don't have to have the gun in your hand to kill someone. Just bizarre. That made no sense to me, and when I heard that, I got so annoyed because I'd forgotten they had that in the movie. Because we watched this like long ago.
Yeah.
And when I saw that, I was like, oh no. I'm definitely not going to enjoy the movie as much now as I did back then.
Yes. Overall, it was a good thriller. It was original. It was something new. It was fresh for its time. I don't like what it spun into, and there are elements of the movie I really didn't enjoy. It was very intriguing. It was a good movie. And Jigsaw works as a very villainous character.
Very iconic as well, because you show most people Jigsaw, they're going to know.
Yes.
So that takes us to our ratings. I'll give it a 7.
And I'll give it a 6.
So that leaves it with a respectable 6.5.
Which is not too bad.
I really think if we had rated it the first time we watched it, it probably would have been much higher.
Yes.
But now we're older and we see a lot more of the issues in it.
Like The Sixth Sense, the second time you watch it, the twist just isn't the same.
Yeah, it doesn't hold up.
Yeah.
So who'd enjoy watching this? I think anyone who really enjoys thrillers and horrors, especially if you haven't seen Saw yet, the original one. So if you've watched like 6 and 7 and whatnot, go back to number 1, because number 1 is really where it started. And I think it is probably the best out of the lot.
Yeah.
But keep watching. As we go through the next couple of weeks, we will eventually rate all of the Saws according to what we personally felt was the best.
Yeah.
Including the new Spiral.
Yes. So let us know in the comments down below, what's your favorite Saw movie?
Bye.
Later.